if you follow me. But at any rate, after the war, the British said, okay, we'll establish the Jewish national home. Now, aside from the fact that, they had made the promise and they had to, go through the motions of fulfilling their promise, they also figured, look, we got to run Palestine now that we have it, okay? We can't do it by ourselves. British imperialism was always based on using somebody in the country against the bulk of the natives. Like in India, they tended to back the Muslims against the Hindus. I'm using that as an example. Or in Ireland, the Protestants against the Catholics. So they figured they would use the Zionists against the Arabs.
Now, you're not the writer of this book, you're the editor.
I am the editor.
Why did you feel that you had to make a book of documents? Because you did cover this subject in earlier books.
Yes. Well, let me put it this way. My attitude, I see myself as a political activist and as a historian, okay? And I based Zionism in the Age of the Dictators, which was my first book, on the documents, all right? And the documents are so overwhelming in their evidence of collaboration that I figured that the public, the average lay person, a lot of them were convinced by my book, but there's no doubt about the documents, And, this is what us historians do, okay? In fact, now what I'm trying to do is set up a website where I would have the documents on the website and then another, linked website where scholars would debate it, and then another linked website where political people would debate the significance of the documents today. But the key is documents.
How long did it take you to do this book?
Well, this book was very quick because I had already had the documents for Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. I would say what happened was that in 1973, was it? Yes, when you had the Second Arab-Israeli War, okay? I was out in Berkeley, California, and, we had won a free speech area in a famous battle in Berkeley, and so me and a bunch of other anti-Zionists were, debating Zionists on the campus there, and I met a guy, Shimshon Vigador, whose father was the editor of the Encyclopedia Judaica, and I had read an article in the Judaica about a thing called the Ha'avara Agreement. Ha'avara is Hebrew for the transfer, okay, which was a trade agreement between the Nazis and the Zionists in 1933. So I asked him about it, and he said he had heard about Zionist collaboration, but he didn't know much about it. So I started doing the research then. But then I realized I had to get to New York where you had a real Jewish library. Berkeley didn't. And so I started doing more research in New York. And then I went to, by chance, I went to Britain and went to Croom Helm, which was one of the leading publishing houses in Britain. They published the Berk's Peerage, you say, yes. And, I explained that I had, all these documents, etc. And they said, look, we'll publish it, but you got to show us every document. In other words, we won't tolerate the slightest mistake because you're going to write one of the most controversial books imaginable. Your enemies are going to go through your book with a magnifying glass, and they're going to blow up the slightest mistake. Okay, so there can be no mistakes. Okay, so I photocopied all the stuff, etc., all that kind of stuff. And I, of course, kept all the document, the photostatic stuff. So when I put this book out, I already had the documents. But it took me, about 10 years to accumulate it, but that's because I was in Berkeley for so long, before I found most of the documents in the Jewish room in the New York Public Library. I going through old Zionist publications and scholarly works and so on.
All right, we don't have a lot of time, so I want to jump right into some of the documents. One is the Zionist Federation addresses the new German state.
Yes.
So I guess this is a couple months after Hitler is chosen to be chancellor. And there's a sentence in there that says something like, the new state which has established the principle of race, we wish to fit our community into the structure.
Yes. What they did was in June 1933, Hitler came to power in January 30th, 1933. In June, they sent the Nazis a document which wasn't published until 1963 in German in Israel. Okay? I found it and had it translated and so on, all that kind of... Well, actually, it was translated by an American Jewish Zionist historian, etc. But I found it and quoted from it extensively in Zionism in the Age of the Dictators. And basically what they were saying is, hey, hi Adolf, you guys are racist and so are we, group, that's the name, the group, that's the thing, etc., etc. And you want us out of here and we want Palestine, so let's do a deal. And what they literally did was they worked out this agreement called the Haravara, or transfer agreement.
So that's the next document I was going to ask about, the agreement for transferring property from Germany to Palestine.
Okay. Now, any German, didn't matter whether you were a Jew or a Gentile, in 1933, we're talking about the depths of the Depression, okay? Everybody's broke. I mean, governments are broke, So if you wanted to take money out of Germany, no matter who you were, you got nicked at the border for like 25%, okay? So what the Zionists and the Nazis did was they worked out a deal where instead of sending the money out over the border, that a Jew would hand over, let's say, 100,000 Reichsmarks. I'm just being arbitrary, 100,000 Reichsmarks to the Nazi government, and the Nazi government would then ship 80,000 Reichsmarks worth of, let's say, steel pipes to Palestine, where the Zionists would then sell the pipes to themselves, to the Arabs, whoever they could, and then give the money to the emigre Jew when he arrived in Palestine. So it was cheaper for the Jew to go out that way than to get nicked for more money going to New York.
Well, that sounds nice, but weren't other Jews then demanding that people not buy any German product?
Of course. What this meant was that the Zionist movement was breaking what you might call the automatic, spontaneous boycott of German goods by Jews all over the world. They actually were selling things like steel pipes and stuff like, whatever the Germans shipped them, they were selling them all over the Middle East. And they even tried to sell them in Europe, but like the British Zionists said, listen, don't try to do it here. I mean, that will just create problems. People will wonder what the hell's going on, But they were selling the goods all over the Middle East.